Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the ninth webinar of season 11 of the National Humanities Center's Humanities in Class webinar series. I'm Mike Williams. I'm Vice President for Education Programs here at the NHC. And as always, it is indeed an honor as well as a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you all. I sincerely hope that you're doing well. I'm a little raspier tonight than normal, which in no way will dampen my enthusiasm for this session and this evening. I'm coming off of a respiratory infection. But I've been looking forward to this webinar for some time now, and I must say, as a result of NHC Education's ongoing connection with TeachRock and the Rock and Soul Forever Foundation, it's been an event that I've hoped would happen for some time now. I joined the center almost 7 years now, and one of the first online courses that I built in my role was from the 60s to now, using music to explore issues of race, gender, and sexuality in contemporary American history. I had a great time building that course with the good folk at TeachRock, including Bill Carbone, Ben Dumball, and the incomparable Imani Wilson. So again, looking forward to tonight. But thank you for taking time, as always, out of your busy schedule to join us. There are over 1,700 of you registered for the session tonight. So it's a little after 7 p.m. here in the East, so we'll go ahead and start. Tonight's session is entitled The TeachRock Method, Arts-Integrated Pedagogical Approaches for History, Music, and Critical Thinking. Our leader for this session is Triza Cox, Program Manager of the TeachRock and the Rock and Soul Forever Foundation. Again, thank you for joining us, Triza. The National Humanities Center is located in Durham, North Carolina, and for now 48 years, we've supported the best in humanities scholarship and humanities education. We are the only private nonprofit institution devoted exclusively to the advancement and to the study of the humanities. Here at the center, the program that I lead, Education Program, serves as an important and critical nexus between humanities experts and scholars, and you all are educators. Our goal is to build those bridges between the scholarly world and the everyday classroom. We support educators at all levels, the large majority being at the K-12 level, but we do have many of you who are collegiate and graduate level educators, as well as community college instructors and museum officials and docents and site directors. I'm joined by an outstanding team that includes Raven Ferguson and Eve Morris, who are passionate about this work and who are committed to ensuring that our program meets the needs of all of our teachers. I'm going to take a moment or so to highlight a few of our recent events. To hear more about all that's happening at the National Humanities Center, I welcome you to check us out at nationalhumanities.org. On the main page, you will find information on this month's features. This month, we highlight the research of 2025, 2026 fellows whose projects examine the ways communities created through proximity or shared experience are formed and transformed in response to crisis. Those scholars include Asa Eager, Grace Elizabeth Hale, and Patrick McKelvey. In the center panel, held recently, late last fall, in conversation how to disagree agreeably, held recently at the World War I Museum and Memorial in Kansas City. This event brought together the progressive Dr. Cornel West and conservative Robert George, who are good friends and are united by their interest in great thinkers from the past and by their commitment to lively, respectful debate or conversation on the questions that matter most. If you're interested in checking that out, the recording is now available on the World War I Museum YouTube page. And in the third panel, we are super excited about the 2026 Being Human Festival. In partnership with humanists and humanist organizations across the country, the National Humanities Center will stage Being Human from April 18th to May 2nd, 2026. Featuring a range of public humanities events, this initiative will support the development of programming for diverse, non-academic audiences across geographic regions and subject areas. And I am super, super excited to announce that registration is now open for those of you who have been waiting. Registration is now open for the 2026 Teaching African American Studies Institute, Teaching the Digital Diaspora, which will be hosted on the historic campus of Prairie View A&M University. Prairie View is just northwest of Houston, Texas. But I will be joined by a select group of passionate, interdisciplinary educators from all over the country from June 15th to June 20th, so 5 days that we'll be on site there. Teaching the Digital Diaspora will move beyond traditional resources to explore how digital humanities can illuminate the complexities of the African diaspora. Participants will work with scholars to understand how these tools reveal hidden histories of resistance, self-determination, and artistic contribution across vast geographies and time periods. We will be accepting applications until March 30th, 2026. So you're interested, please consider applying. I see several names in the chat who have participated in our institutes before. This institute, again, will be held across 5 days from June 15th to June 20th. Lodging, meals, and transportation will be covered for you all, including a stipend of $1,000 for your time and on site with us and your successful completion of this institute. All of the work that I'm describing to you is informed by our strong and talented Teacher Advisory Council, and you see a few of our good friends who are here tonight. We have a team of educators across the country who give us feedback and who consult with us on various projects. Our 2025-26 council began their service year last month. Actually last August, but we're looking forward to continuing our work with them. YouTube recordings. If you or your colleagues are interested in checking out recordings of past webinars, please navigate to our webinars landing page and follow the webinar archives link to our dedicated YouTube page where you will find our past recordings. Please note that viewings of past recordings are not eligible for CEU and or professional development hours. So you have to physically be here. You have to be participating in the live session to receive those professional development hours. Tonight's webinar is audio and PowerPoint based, so you will not see our speaker directly, but you will be able to interact with both of us through the chat box. And I think that I see you all are active in the chat right now, and I see a few questions about sound right there. So thanks to Brittany and Dorcas for pointing out that any questions should be sent to our help desk. But I will recommend that please check your browser settings if you're having difficulty with any audio, because sometimes that will happen. And I will include this in the chat shortly after we begin as well. Okay? But if you have any questions of Triza throughout the night, please enter those questions in the audience Q&A, in the Q&A chat. So she'll build in time to answer questions, but please enter those questions in the audience chat, and I will bring them to her attention at the appropriate time. Thank you for joining us this evening. You are now attending the webinar entitled The TeachRock Method, Arts-Integrated Pedagogical Approaches for History, Music, and Critical Thinking. Our leader for this session is Triza Cox, Program Manager, TeachRock, and the Rock and Soul Forever Foundation. We also have our members of our Teacher Advisory Council, Dorcas, Gyekye, and Brittany Lane, who are members of this year's TAC, who will serve as our TA for tonight's session. They have already been active in the chat, sharing thoughts and answering questions. So again, thank you both for being here. We appreciate you. Triza Cox is the program manager for TeachRock's Harmony Student Wellness Program. In this capacity, she uses her passion for democratizing arts access, as well as her commitment to wellness through the use of art to engage students in social and emotional learning. Triza holds a Master of Fine Arts in Theater Performance from the University of Louisville and has worked for over a decade as an arts educator as well as a playwright, director, producer, and actor. Additionally, Teresa has been a certified prevention specialist and worked in drug and alcohol prevention. She is currently a National Leaders of Color Fellow in Arts Administration. Teresa was previously awarded a fellowship in screenwriting from the South Carolina Arts Commission. She is also currently the artistic director of the Drama Lady Theater Group. Teresa, thank you so very much for joining us this evening. We are looking forward to your talk. And again, it's been a long time coming, so I'm glad we were able to make this happen. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Mike. And thank you to everyone at NHC. The TeachRock family, we love this team. We are so grateful to be a part of tonight's programming and everything that we are fortunate enough to do with you all, and just super excited to share the information that we have tonight and just continue expanding and building and growing knowledge and continuing education for everyone. So really great. Well, again, that was a beautiful introduction. And one thing I want to highlight when Mike read my resume read my bio, is that I have a personal mission to democratize arts access. And that was really what drew me to this organization, because a lot of what TeachRock does is really aligned with making sure that educational resources and artistic resources are available to as many people anywhere as possible. And so I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about TeachRock. For over a decade, TeachRock has served to ameliorate the gap in young people's access to the arts, especially after policies like No Child Left Behind. To date, we have reached over 1 million students. We've reached over 79,000 teachers, parents, students from across the United States and internationally use our curriculum. And I want to stress this for everyone listening to us live tonight and those who may find the recording. We are an open educational resource program, which means that all of our curriculum, the things that I will highlight for you tonight and things you may discover when you go to teachrock.org, it's all free. And so that's what I mean about democratizing access to educational resources and access to the arts. I just want to give you a really quick snapshot of what we do before we do our deep dive. So we offer a plethora of K through 12 lessons in math and sciences, social studies, history, and social and emotional learning. And we do this through an arts-integrated pedagogy, and I'm going to speak more about that tonight. Now, at a glance, this is what that process looks like. So we want our students to learn about the Great Migration. Well, let's do that through learning about the music and the life of Muddy Waters. So we want our students to learn about ratios. Well, let's do that by looking at the social media engagements of Beyonce. What if we want our students to learn about science and technology and engineering? Well, let's examine that through the PA systems of the Grateful Dead. So again, this is just a really quick snapshot of how we teach these various subject matters, but through an arts integrated process. I think it's helpful because I've been throwing that word around a lot this evening, and it's in the title of my presentation. I think it's helpful for us to get on accord with a working definition of arts integration. So this is my working definition of it. In arts integrated curricula, the arts become the approach to teaching and a vehicle for learning. Students often engage in dual learning objectives as they engage in the creative process, and they explore connections between art forms and other subject areas. Arts integration helps give comprehensive understanding of complex interdisciplinary subjects. Now, there's a plethora of data that shows the effectiveness of arts integration. What's being reported showcases that arts integration practices are aligned with how students learn. For example, there's a survey of 156 teachers where 80.4% of those teachers reported their students having an increase in subject matter interest when arts integration was used to teach the subject. Arts integration energizes teachers by providing increased professional satisfaction. So I want to spend a little time just a moment talking about the legacy and the foundational roots of arts integration. And I think it would be a good starting point to contrast it to where a lot of people are with their thinking about educational approaches today. So I have this quote by this wonderful arts historian, Seema Rao, and she sums up the problem of the way many people currently think of that education should be organized for young people. The quote that she has is, "We have turned education into people who think all knowledge is discrete and separate." And I believe that's probably a more recent approach to education. It has not always been the case. And in fact, there's really a legacy of many educational philosophers who did not endorse this way of thinking. For example, John Dewey. In his 1931 speech to the Harvard Teachers Association, he chastised education for not appealing to the imagination or the emotions of students. Dewey proposed that subjects be reorganized so that the interdependence of knowledge and the relationship between knowledge and human purpose would be made clear. He believed that we could increase both intellectual curiosity and understanding while disclosing the world about us as a perennial source of aesthetic delight. He continued with this idea of using arts in education in his 1934 book, Art as Experience. He noted that when art is used in a child's curriculum, it provides the material affording a consciousness of the world in which he has to play a part. Art quickens us from the slackness of routine and enables us to forget ourselves by finding ourselves in the delight of experiencing the world about us in varied qualities and forms. So not only is there a philosophical basis for arts integration, but there are theoretical foundations for arts integration in current ideas of pedagogical approaches. So for example, arts integration very much aligns with multiple intelligence theories. Any form of engagement with the arts, rather through arts integration or arts instruction, helps shape spatial, naturalistic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and bodily kinesthetic intelligences. Arts integrated curriculum allows for participatory, multifaceted teaching methods rather than or even in addition to direct or expository instructional choices, and this process is in accordance with theories of multiple intelligence. Some teachers are reporting that teaching for multiple intelligences can be enhanced through arts integration by methods such as using metaphorical objects for different historical events, because this helps reach young people who have high spatial intelligence. Also, utilizing music as a primary source, which I'm going to spend a great deal of time talking about tonight, is really helpful for a historical period, and it's very useful for contextualizing that historical period for young people. I also want to just note that arts integration is highly effective for neurodivergent students. The integration of the arts in classrooms not only enhances creativity and cognitive engagement, but also creates a supportive environment for neurodivergent pupils, including those with ADHD, autism spectrum conditions, or mental health challenges. The works of Gerber and Martin on teaching students with special needs indicate that arts-based approaches foster multisensory learning, effectively addressing diverse sensory and cognitive needs. Collaborative arts activities, in particular, have been shown to reduce feelings of isolation and foster a sense of belonging among neurodivergent pupils. Arts integration potentially allows for simultaneous utilization of all three domains of learning. So the three domains of learning I'm referring to are the cognitive domain, which is where we think and reason and knowledge-based skills. The affective domain centers are where our interpersonal skills of thinking and reasoning related to feelings or emotion. And the psychomotor domain, or the kinesthetic domain, where physical and manual skills can grow. There's an opportunity for many arts integrated lessons to utilize all three. But I also want us to really think about this affective domain, because it's going to come into play as we're exploring specifically the TeachRock method. On top of that, I want us to think about a little bit of brain science. And so aesthetic experiences arise from an interaction of three brain systems called the aesthetic triad. That's the sensory motor system, where we perceive color or movement. The emotion valuation system is concerned with feelings and reward and liking. And the knowledge meaning system involves prior knowledge and personal experiences. So let's think about that too. So the knowledge meaning system makes artwork more than just an object or sensory experience, even though those things are very important. Moving pieces of artwork connect with us on a personal level. So by using art as a vehicle and a process for learning, we are inviting a more personal and a deeper and a more meaningful connection to the subject matter. And let's even add some more when we're looking at how the brain works with that. An aesthetic experience really can oftentimes be thought about as mirrors and windows, because the aesthetic experience allows us to have personal reflection and personal relevance. Remember, when we're talking about these different brain systems, we're connecting with prior knowledge and prior experiences and things that are resonating with us. So when something relates to our self-construct, it acts like a roadmap to go deeper. But additionally, aesthetic experiences are also windows to the artist's inner world. There's a study by Pulaski, and the research team, they asked artists to talk about their inner emotions and experiences when they created their work of art, or when they created their particular pieces. And then they noted what the artist shared with them. And then they asked viewers or people who engaged with that artwork to describe their emotions. And what they found was that viewers were able to describe similar emotions and experiences that the artist described. So through arts integration and arts engagement, we're able actually to access the emotions and get at least a window to the experiences and emotions of the artist, which means that when we're using the artwork as a primary source, we're getting a closer and more meaningful understanding of what that artist is reflecting on, commenting on, criticizing, or however they're using their artwork to reflect the current events of that time period with which the work was created. I also want to note social connections in arts integration. So arts integration aligns with social cultural theory, which this was introduced by Soviet psychologist Lev Vygotsky. The theory suggests that learning is not simply an internal or an individual process, it's a deeply social and cultural one. Youth develop higher order thinking skills through meaningful dialogue and collaborative activities, especially with more knowledgeable individuals such as parents, teachers, or peers. Social cultural theory suggests that learning does not occur solely through individual mental processes, but it is also heavily influenced by social and cultural factors. These factors shape how individuals learn, what they prioritize as important information, and how they apply that knowledge in different contexts. So practical applications of this social cultural theory that arts integration uses, and there are many, many practical applications, but I'm highlighting the ones that arts integration avails us of, are collaborative learning. using cultural tools and artifacts, guided participation and scaffolding, encouraging private speech through means such as journal writing, embedding the local social environment, and emphasizing dialogue and verbal interaction. So we've got a pretty good understanding of the foundation of arts integration and which pedagogical theories that seem to align with it. I want to specifically talk about the TeachRock methodology of arts integration. So I would sum it up as a two-pronged system: responding to arts, or arts responding, and then arts assessment, or assessment through the arts. So when students listen to a music piece that we're using as a primary source, they're going to respond to it. And usually we invite them to use a three-step process: observing, reflecting, and questioning. So close listening: what are you hearing in the music? What are the lyrics saying? And then once you note that, then reflecting on what could that mean, and what does that compare to, or what does that contrast with from your prior knowledge? And then questioning, which is, what more information do I want to know, or what more about this world that this art was created in do I have? What do I want to know? And then assessment through art is really where a student gets to create. And we have multidisciplinary arts-based activities. So oftentimes they're writing poems, or they're writing short stories. There are many visual arts projects, such as creating album covers, or creating collages of it. There are even some lessons that have some choreography involved, or that have some music making through body percussion, or that have music making through writing a song verse or a rap verse. And through this two-pronged process of the TeachRock methodology, we're inviting very much a holistic learning of the subject matter. All right, so let's go a little deeper. And I hinted to it earlier, so what I want to talk about is using music as a primary source. So the first thing I want to say about using music as a primary source is that there's a lot of research out there about it in general. And then I'm going to get into something that's a little bit more specific to TeachRock. But music as a primary source is very useful for many reasons, because music in and of itself helps people process and deal with events in a communal framework. And it offers invaluable access and with access to what's going on from the artist's POV, and then also from a collective POV. And with other sources, it can deepen our understanding. Music is distinctively oral, and that plays a role in how it disseminates, probably even more so than other forms of communication. Music has a wide reach and a wide possibility for dissemination because of how we consume and interact with music. And there's some really interesting research right now that talks about when we are studying periods or events in history where perhaps primary sources are not available, or perhaps even destroyed. Oftentimes music survives even if other primary sources are not there. So again, just understanding how valuable, how important music can be as a primary source will open a lot of opportunities for some really great understanding of different groups of people, different points in history, and different eras and events and periods. Now, on top of that, we can think about music does function as an object. So it's a medium for discussion and documentation, but it also is an activity, which means social dynamics play out with music. So who gets to perform? Who gets to create in terms of what kind of music they get to create, what's available to them. All of that plays out with music, and with some of the music I'm going to show you tonight, you'll kind of see this play out. So that lets us know about hierarchies and racial and gender and class dynamics and all of these things. And music is also a repository for communal knowledge. So let me jump into specifically the TeachRock approach, which is our 5 M's approach. And so each M is a category that we would place for primary sources when we're using music. So the 5 M's are musicians, music media, music materials, music making, and music mapping. So let's go one by one so I can describe these categories. So musicians. Musicians are music makers, and that can be anyone. I live very close, just a couple of miles outside of New York City, and I'm in the city in Manhattan and Brooklyn nearly every day, and I'm on the subway nearly every day. And I'm always seeing musicians perform in the subway. Well, those are musicians, and they can be considered in our primary sources. And then, so it doesn't have to be just a professional musician. It doesn't have to be someone who's making a lot of money. It's the busker in the subway. It's the person who's performing in their religious house of worship. It's the person who is humming to themselves while they're washing their face in the morning. All of these people are music makers. And what we're really understanding is that all of these people that I just described are historical actors. These are people who are creating music within a specific context, within cultural norms, and they're creating music and they have a specific identity and there are events going on. And so their creations allow us to connect with what's happening with them and around them when we're using them as a primary source. Well, the question is, how do we use them as a primary source? Well, some examples are, we can look at their autobiographies. So even if it is the subway performer, if that subway performer writes an autobiography, that would be a primary source for that music from that musician. We can look at their diaries and journals and their memoirs. We can look at newspaper articles about them, and we can also look at letters and other personal correspondence from them. There's music media, which is where we're using recordings and representation of music. So we can think about sheet music, audio recordings, music videos, and lyric sheets. And we'll do a lot of the lyric examination tonight. And again, all of that is just very useful information for letting us know what's happening during that period that this music is made. And also, we look at different elements with music media. So, and we're going to point out some of this tonight. I'm going to ask you, what instrumentation are you hearing? What kind of voices are you hearing? Is the music being performed in a specific style? All of that is great information for us to pay attention to. And then we can look at music materials. So music materials are objects that surround music. So we can look at the instruments, we can look at documents, we can look at recording technology. Posters are very useful in the attire of musicians, and merchandise. There's music making, and usually I would say that this tends to trend more towards more modern times when we had the technology to video record. So this is where we're looking at live performances of music. And it's really examining the who, what, when, where. So the who, there are two who's. There's the musician who is making the music, and then there's the who, to whom that musician is performing, and then there's the where. Where is this happening? Is this at Madison Square Garden or some big arena, or is this happening in a local church in Appalachia? And then looking at the when, what time period, of course, and then the what is being communicated, what's the interaction, what is the communal experience of that? Yeah. And then my favorite is music mapping. And with music mapping, we're looking at music genealogies. And so we're a really great sort of guide for looking at music genealogies. We can look at the work of ethnomusicologist Portia Maltzby, and she's done incredible work tracing connections in African American musical forms over the course of 4 centuries. And a lesson that we have that really, I think, does an excellent job of music mapping is a lesson where we look at Beyonce's Single Ladies, and we look at the rhythm, the clap rhythm in Single Ladies. And what we do is we examine that through that lesson, we examine that clap rhythm and we trace it all the way back through blues music and gospel music. And again, as we're tracing it back, we're looking at these different historical periods too. So, and then how the evolution of how this style made its way to pop music, and then other significant musicians who utilize that same rhythm, and under what circumstances were they creating music. So I think that's a natural pausing place right there. I want to pause just for a moment and invite any questions about what we've talked about so far.
Okay, good deal. Thank you so much. And I appreciate everyone's remarks, all the remarks that you've included from a personal level, but also from um, your classroom experience. Cosette mentioned it's important for people to remember for themselves and keeping the will to create alive instead of thinking they're not legit enough, particularly uh, when she was reflecting on just music mapping and music making. Um, Question: how do you help students who don't think they are creative? And I think this is an extension of just everyone has the ability to make to become music makers or make music. The question is, how do you help students who just don't think they are creative?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I would say that that's actually a, at least a twofold process, possibly
Hmm.
more. Number one is within our lessons, we do try to scaffold it heavily so that there's no. So if I just come up to any student and say, write me a song verse, that's intimidating if that student has never done that before. But if I break step by step down, in a lot of the lessons that I write and in lessons that our team writes, we'll actually show them how to use. We give them miniature versions of rhyming dictionaries and show them how to rhyme lines and form rhyming formats, and then form rhythm patterns and things like that. So it's sort of like, yes, baking the whole pie is intimidating, but each step in the process is actually achievable. And once you follow the steps, then you're able to create that song. I mixed so many metaphors there, forgive me. And then the other uh, the other fold I would say is just the consistency. And so one reason that people don't feel creative, and this is from my professional life and my personal life, when in all of the different environments, whether I'm working with teachers or students, or I also train people in other professions. And a lot of times people don't feel creative because they haven't had consistent opportunities for creativity. And that goes back to that Sima Rao quote. So basically, we sort of segregated the creative process in terms of saying, okay, well, if you're the artsy kid, you get to do the creative things. But if you're good at math and science, then you shouldn't pay attention to arts and music and other things like that. And what those of us who maybe have a holistic approach to our lives realize is that we really should engage in creativity every day, even if it's in small ways. So, what we can offer for our students is, again, scaffolded instructions, but opportunities to consistently engage. And yes, you may be the science kid, or you may be something that doesn't necessarily make you think that you have that creative bone in you, but if you are engaging with it and understanding that you you can fail. And what I mean by that is you don't have to get it perfect, because the point is the process. It's not the product is not the point. The process is the point. And that there is joy and beauty in that process, then that muscle builds up and that student can feel more empowered.
Yes, I love that. The process, joy and beauty in the process. Thank you so much for that. Moray's question is, if you will, who is one of the leading ethnomusicologists in the area of Latinx cultures? If you could speak to that. Um,
Oh
any?
man. I should have said that's my favorite one, because now I have to say that I'm that well versed in it. I'm going to have to look that up. I apologize.
Yes,
We
no worries. No,
we're going to look
no.
at Latin music and Puerto Rican migration tonight, but to
Hmm.
tell you who the scholars are,
Yeah,
I'm going to be a little remiss on that one. I apologize. Please forgive me.
yeah,
This is I had recently gone through that Beyonce lesson with the rhythm clapping, so and it's so much fun to engage in. So I was
yeah.
very well aware of that one. But yeah,
Mm,
forgive me. I don't have that quickly
yeah.
available.
No, no worries. Thank you so much for that. And I know we have quite a bit to cover tonight, so everyone continue to drop your questions um, in the Q&A, and we will circle back, time permitting, to make sure we get them all covered. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, Triza, we can move ahead. Thanks.
Sounds perfect. I'll hop right back in. So now we're going to go through some lessons, and I promise we have a great Latin music lesson. You will forgive my lack of knowledge about a Latin ethnomusicologist, but the first lesson I'm going to tell to you about is this lesson, early Reconstruction, featuring the Higher Sisters. So I just want to give you a little bit of background about this. This lesson is a part of our People's Playlist lesson, and the People's Playlist curriculum is in partnership with the Library of Congress. So it really examines U.S. history. There's multiple lessons and multiple units, and we're examining U.S. history from post-Civil War all the way through the new millennium. And this lesson is such a great example, and all of the lessons, about the 5M's approach to using music as a primary source. So we'll just hop right into it. These are the Higher Sisters. So I want to give you a little bit of background about them before we hop into this lesson. So these sisters are Anna Matta and Emma Louise Hires. They were born in Sacramento, California in the 1850s. The family moved to San Francisco, and that proved to be very fortunate because their parents were musicians, and they were already getting very great musical training. But in San Francisco, they also had the benefit of that city had an activist African American community, so they got an education in civics with being in San Francisco. And on April 22nd of 1867, Anna, who was a soprano, and Emma, who was a contralto, made their singing debut in Sacramento's Metropolitan Theater, and they were performing operatic arias for an enraptured audience. This lesson explores the work of the Higher Sisters and how it reflected and examined Reconstruction and the social, political, and economic results from the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And just to refresh our knowledge, these amendments respectively gave freedom to African Americans, gave citizenship to African Americans, and gave African American males the right to vote. The Higher Sisters purposely chose to perform opera because of their mastery of the form, and in part as an act of rebellion against minstrelsy, which was a racist performance style of that period. Their virtuosity allowed them to tour Europe. But then President Rutherford B. Hayes pulls federal troops from the South, and this signals the end of Reconstruction and ushers in Jim Crow laws, which strengthen an artificial caste system where Black people's political, social, and economic rights were severely limited. Now, the Higher Sisters actually were so popular in Europe that they could have said, well, given what's happening in the US, we can just stay in Europe and tour and make more money. But they were committed to addressing injustices. And during this time, with the rise of Jim Crow, minstrelsy grows in popularity. So this racist art form, and with its racist depictions of black people, becomes even more popular. And so the Higher Sisters decide to continue their artistic project of establishing the dignity and humanity of African Americans through the stage. So right after the end of Reconstruction, they release Out of Bondage, which is the first American musical ever produced. So the first American musical ever produced was produced by two African American sisters. We're going to play you a clip from a song that's performed by, so this is a song that is in the original show, but of course it's a videotape of modern performers performing that. And we'll play that for you in just one moment.
Down in Alabama, before I was set free, I loved a dark-eyed yellow gal and thought that she loved me. But she has proved inconstant and left me here to tell the sorrow that my heart feels for deceitful Sarah Bell.
You can pay attention to the beautiful performance and the beautiful score and lyrics of this song, and that it's definitely in this operatic style. So I'm going to play you one more video that will really explain in further depth sort of this birth of the musical that the Higher Sisters were able to bring about. All right, here we go.
The Hires used various types of music to advance one musical story. This innovation produced what we now call a musical.
In those days, there was melodrama, and so the characters didn't change. Most of the time, the characters were men, like the villain. They not only opened the door to the new musical, to the first musicals, they brought the first African-American leads onto the mainstream stage.
And Emancipation Day, I have lived to see that too. The happiest day the colored man ever knew. Then get up early in the morn, I'm coming. Ring the bell and blow the horn and let me hear the banjo play. Tell the old folks one and all I'm coming. For I am so happy that I sings all day.
They brought the first integrated stage, and they set the stage for the musicals that were to come in the 1890s.
Great. So there we get some background on not only were the Higher Sisters these innovators, and this is something I have a theater degree, and I did not learn about the Higher Sisters until I studied this lesson that our team created. So this is something that really needs to be acknowledged because it's so important. The American musicals are such a specific art form, especially in theater. It's really something that Americans can lay claim to, even though other countries do have musical theater, but I really consider it very much an American art form. And to really understand that this sprang from these women working in this post-Reconstruction era. They were using it to combat minstrelsy. They really developed these significant plots and stories and characters. And moreover, they used interracial casting on stage. And this is the late 19th century. I mean, how remarkable is that? That's really just amazing and fascinating. Okay, so I want to highlight something about this musical. This musical, as I mentioned when I was introducing the Higher Sisters, it is so useful for studying this particular point in time, this Reconstruction in this post-Reconstruction period. But and so it's useful for studying history. But I actually want to invite you to think about this musical and this work of art for useful to studying even economics. And so we have a partnership. TeachRock has a partnership with the Georgia Council for Economic Education. So I'm going to steal sort of their framework because it's a very good framework to use for secondary education, where we for secondary education, when we're teaching economics, we can really teach around these 6 themes of scarcity, incentives, trade, systems, investment, and interdependence. Now, when we're looking at the characters and the plot of Out of Bondage, the theme that we can probably address many of the themes, but the theme that I think is highly significant is the theme of incentives. So I want to just invite everyone to think about, and this is something that I ask when I'm working with different groups of people. Well, why do you go to work? Why do most of us have early starts to our morning, and so that means we're sacrificing. If we didn't go to work, we could sleep in, we could, go do other things we like to do. I live on the river, on the Hudson River. I could go walk along the river or do some river activities. We could spend time with our family and friends. But many of us, most of us, nearly everybody on this call wakes up early, goes to work. So we're sacrificing things. We're sacrificing free time, and we're sacrificing. We're commuting to work and just a lot of things. So why do we do it? And the first answer most people say is we go to work because of our paycheck. And exactly right. That's why I go to work too. And so we go to work for our paycheck. And then some people say, particularly, my friends and myself, those of us in education and many of us in the arts will say, well, because this work aligns with our mission. If we're in education, we want to serve young people and help mold minds for the next generation. If we're in the arts, we see our art as an act of service for ushering in truth and beauty in the world. All of that, very valid. That's why I do it too. Okay. And then other people will say, well, I go to work because all of that, mission, paycheck, and then other benefits such as my retirement or my health care, and those are factors with most people, is why we go to work too. So from an economic framework, everything we just mentioned, those are positive incentives. We sacrifice time with our families, time sleeping in, time doing our hobbies and our other activities we enjoy. We sacrifice all of that because of all those positive incentives that we just named. But what would happen, I want to invite us to imagine when people are enslaved, how incentives work in terms of their work. So there's no pay, there's no retirement benefit, there's no health care, and I would say other than maybe just surviving, there's really no mission attached to this work. Moreover, with chattel slavery, there's no opportunity for sacrificing, thinking that, okay, I make this sacrifice, but the next generation will benefit from my sacrifice. So all that's taken away. So I would hazard to say there's little to no positive incentive for work for enslaved people. There are incentives, and most, if not all of them, are negative incentives. These are incentives of force and coercion. So there's a threat of violence and brutal punishment. there's the threat of even death. And that's those negative incentives are what push people to work under an enslaved system. And out of bondage, and we want to think about this because of the structure of out of bondage. Out of bondage is a 3-act play. The first act takes place before the Civil War. So most of the characters are enslaved in the first act. The second act takes place during the Civil War. And the third act takes place after the Civil War. So in the first act, you have people who are working under a negative incentive. And when people are working under almost a completely negative incentive system, that means their relationship to work is punitive. The way they see work is as being punitive. And that's what you see in the characters. Their relationship to work, they have no good thoughts about it because it's this punitive system. And then by the second act, when we're during the Civil War, there's a glimmer of hope. Well, maybe something may come out of this war. Maybe something better is on the horizon, but not a complete, absolute hopefulness, but a glimmer of it. And in the third act, that's where you really see the transformation of the relationship to work, because now we are working under freedom. Now we are getting paid for our work. Now we are actually getting positive incentives for our work. So the relationship to work changes, and the work even becomes mission-based, where they see their efforts not only as something that can better their lives, but they see their work as being available to make a contribution for others like them and the next generation after them. And that is the story that you get in Out of Bondage. It's beautiful with all that beautiful music that we played in those clips for you. And this is what we are showing on the screen right now. This is a poster advertising it, so you can see from that. And again, this would fall under music materials because this is a flyer poster advertising it. So you can see that they're performing at Norumbega Hall in Bangor, Maine. That this is happening in 1878, and we could do a deep dive of observation, reflecting and questioning even further with it. But for now, I'll leave it at that. Now, when I was putting together this talk for you tonight, I was debating on reading excerpts of the play, but some of those scenes have 5 characters in it, and while I may have some talent as a performer, I don't know if I can flip my voice that much to make it make sense. I think it would get convoluted with one person reading it. But those excerpts are available on the landing page for that lesson. So feel free to go to teachrock.org and explore that lesson. Okay. So I'm going to hop right in unless I'll take a half a second pause just to see if there are any burning questions about this lesson that I just kind of gave you an overview of.
Good deal. Thank you so much. And everyone, thank you for your remarks. I have them in the audience chat, and I have a few that are in the Q&A as well. But from a practical standpoint, someone would like to see slide 40 again. So will you click on that one? I believe they're going to take a screenshot of it. Murray, I have your message, and you wanted to take a look at that one. All right, we'll give you maybe 5 seconds to go ahead and get that done. Thank you again, Triza, on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Really, I love that we have this beautiful partnership with the Georgia Council of Economic Education. So it means it means, one, interpreting lessons that we initially thought were history lessons or social studies lessons, but also looking at them through an economics lens, which I just did with this out of bondage lesson. But also we're creating more lessons that have very direct economic themes in them too, but also use history and music as a primary source. So it's really fun. I love it.
Good. Okay, good deal. Thank you for doing that, and I hope you all were able to get that get the information you needed off that slide. Okay, so a question we had earlier was focused on special education, and the question was about, I have to scroll up, Are there any particular genres or approaches you would recommend for the special education classrooms? And I think a lot of what you have covered already, I think you may have already answered those, but if you wanted to circle back and specifically point out anything for Emma, who asked the question earlier.
Thank you, Emma. I think that in a lot of ways, these lessons they're open educational resources, but they really empower the teacher to sort of mold them to what is going to work best with your students. So it's a little bit of a challenging question to ask. I think collaborative the collaborative nature of many of how these lessons are organized, the uh, uh, the multiple intelligences, the use of different kinesthetic and spatial and things like that. They're embedded in many lessons, but then I would say it would probably depend on the needs of your students. And
Hmm.
but what
Hmm.
you can do is if you know there's a topic, so let's say you really do want to cover reconstruction, so you're interested in this out of bondage lesson, this the higher sisters lesson, then you can, if you go through the lesson and you want to see what would be some suggestions that we would have, and you're talking about the needs of your students, we're available to reach out to, and we can offer suggestions, but you are more of an expert on your specific students' needs.
Good deal. Thank you. And everyone, we're at the top of the hour right now. We have about another 30 minutes remaining. So I would be mindful to incorporate your questions. So continue to include them in the Q&A chat. But for now, we're going to move ahead.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I am I'm loquacious, so
It's all
yeah.
it's all good. All good.
All right, so let's just hop in because this was germane to one of those questions. Where let's get into some Latin music in the Puerto Rican migration. So this lesson uses music as a primary source to begin exploring the historical reasons behind Puerto Rican migration in New York City in the 1940s and 50s, and the effects of migration had on American popular music. Okay, I am going to play just a bit of this song. It's a long song, and since we're short on time, I'm going to probably stop it after about 45 seconds. But this song is called Lamenta Boricano. The artists performing it are PJ Sensuela and Cristal Forodona. They are contemporary artists, and they're doing an adaptation and a cover of a song from the 1930s. But we'll just play less than a minute of it, and then I'm going to hop right in and bring this back to the mid-century migration of Puerto Ricans to New York City. So off we go. Okay, I'm just going to pause it here. And if you want to, again, this is linked to our site. And I just invite you to listen to the full version. But if we can just go ahead and stop the video right here so I can hop into the rest of the lesson, that would be great. Okay. Oh, sorry. It's still. I was. I wasn't sure if it was still playing. I apologize for
Yeah,
that delay. Forgive
yeah,
me.
and I apologize for that as well.
Yeah.
Apparently, in the player, I hit the wrong button to stop it. So we're
No
all
worries.
good. Thank you.
We tend to be our lessons are technology heavier. There's always just something that happens. But really quickly, let me give you background on this song. So we saw a modern interpretation, but this song dates back to 1930, and it was created by Puerto Rican composer Rafael Hernandez, and it's actually considered one of the first Latin American protest songs. And really quickly, I want to go over the original lyrics for this song. So, just as a side note, if you have Spanish speaking students in your classroom, which I often do when I'm working as a teaching artist or going into the classroom, it's a really great opportunity for them to help the non Spanish speaking students understand and decipher the lyrics. But we'll just go over it really quickly in English. So he sets off happily with his cargo to the city, carries in his thoughts a whole world filled with happiness. Oh, of happiness. He plans to remedy the household situation, which is all that he loves, yeah, and happy. The peasant goes thinking, saying, singing like on the way. If I sell my load, my dear God, I'll buy a suit for my little old lady. And his mare is happy also when he knows that the song is all a joyful hymn. And then the daylight comes unexpectedly, and they arrive to the city market. So as you can see, this song is a narrative song. The protagonist in this song is this peasant, which clues us into that this is not a person of a lot of financial means. He's optimistic. He's thinking, if I go, I'm going to go to the city market and I'm going to sell, and then I'll be able to to buy a suit for my old lady. But there's a hint that all is not well in this peasant's life, because he says he plans to remedy the household situation. Now, let's interpret that a little bit. If something needs a remedy, it probably means all is not well. And just by deducing that this is a peasant, perhaps what's not well is financial stress. But let's look at, so this is about two-thirds of the lyrics. Let's see how this story ends. So the entire morning goes by without anyone wanting to buy his load. Oh, to buy his load, everything is deserted, and the town is full of need. Oh, of need. The mourning is heard everywhere in my unhappy Boricane. Yeah, and sad. The peasant goes thinking, saying, crying like this on the way. What will happen to Boricane? My dear God, what will happen to my children and my home? Oh, all right. So this narrative did not have a happy ending. He went to the market and was not able to sell anything. And he looked around. Just let me pause for a half a second and just say that, of course, in this lesson, we talk about, as we scaffold this, we would explain to students that Boricane is the Taino name for Puerto Rico. And so he's saying there's mourning all around, and that in my unhappy Boricane. So Puerto Rico is unhappy, is what he's talking about this. And he's wondering what will happen to Puerto Rico. And not only that, what will happen to my household with my children. And yeah, so the optimism has been destroyed by the end of the song. So to understand how we got to that place that Rafael Hernandez is talking about in 1930, let's back it up and go to the Monroe Doctrine in 1823. So the Monroe Doctrine was authored by James Monroe, 1823, and it states that any attempt by European great powers to intervene in the affairs of the Western Hemisphere could be seen by the U.S. as a hostile act. Now, a lot of people said, well, they were trying to prevent further colonization in the Western Hemisphere, blah, blah, blah. Yes, true, but this was developed in large part to protect the U.S. economy, which relied heavily on slavery in the Caribbean, and they were trying to protect that economy from foreign intervention. Okay, so this act set the stage for events later in the 19th century. On February 15th, 1898, the USS Maine mysteriously exploded in Cuba's Havana Harbor. The battleship was deployed to Cuba to protect the U.S., held lands during an ongoing war for Cuban independence between Cuban revolutionaries and the colonialist Spanish army. The destruction of the USS Maine led to the U.S.'s direct involvement in the Cuban independence struggle by initiating the Spanish American War. The war lasted 3 months and resulted in independence for Cuba as part of Spain's surrender. The U.S. also gained the island of Puerto Rico. In 1900, the U.S. Congress passed the Foraker Act of 1900, which made Puerto Rico an unincorporated territory of the United States. Cuba and Puerto Rico's economy reliance on the whims of the sugar trade led to widespread poverty for much of the population. And that's where we are at this point in the song. Because of how the sugar trade basically was not greatly beneficial for the average citizen living and working in Puerto Rico, this is the type of poverty that is described in this narrative of this song. But then in 1947, the U.S. launched Operation Bootstraps to diversify Puerto Rico's economy through industrialization. The industrialization led to many Puerto Rican residents migrating to mainland USA to work in manufacturing jobs to aid the U.S. war effort. And many of the Puerto Rican migrants to New York City lived in communities in Spanish Harlem. These migration patterns and neighborhoods cultivated an influential Latin culture on New York City, which included music and dance. Okay, just a real snapshot. This is a map of Manhattan. This is Spanish Harlem up here in the northeastern pocket right on the East River. I want to play just a snippet, and I'm only going to play about, again, just because we're short on time, I'm going to play about 30 to 45 seconds of this music, Caribbean music from the 1940s and 50s, just so you can see the music that was coming out of Spanish Harlem during this time period. So we'll go ahead and play that for you really quickly. Okay, I'll just pause it there. That's a collection of a few songs, but I'm just going to pause it there just to point out a few things. If you listen to the whole collection, what you'll notice is that number one, the groups are really usually pretty small. They're mostly trios or some duos. They're also there. So when we're talking about what instruments we're hearing in this music, we're hearing a lot of guitar in this music and some percussion, some drums. But we're going to compare, because what happens a little bit later in this mid-century is that promoters in New York City caught wind of this wonderful Latin music that was being created in Latin neighborhoods in New York City, such as Spanish Harlem. And so then they realized that there's an opportunity to book Latin musicians in the ballrooms in Midtown. So you can see Spanish Harlem is up here in the northeastern pocket. Midtown is more in the center of Manhattan. And you have these ballrooms, the Palladium Ballroom, the Winter Garden, and the Brill. They're all relatively close to each other in Midtown. And so the acts that became really popular through that, there are some known as the Big Three, which are Tito Puente, Tito Rodriguez, and Frank Machito Grillo. And we'll just play just a highlight of that big band sound. I want us to compare and as we listen, compare and contrast that with what we were hearing from those groups of the 40s and 50s. All right, so we'll just pause it there. And I'm going to just wrap up this lesson. There's another slide where we would, another music clip where we would compare Machito to Dizzy Gillespie. But the whole point is just that as the market, as this gets commercialized even more through these promoters in the ballrooms, it also kind of affects the style and the sound. So then you see these big orchestras with all these horn instruments and different types of percussion instruments, and so it's less of that intimate sound that we were hearing in the 1940s and 50s and more of this big band style. But remember, these are dance ballrooms, so they really wanted these big band sounds in these dance ballrooms. So I just want to highlight, I actually didn't highlight this when we were talking about the Higher Sisters, but I want to highlight the arts-based assessment in this lesson. So the arts-based assessment is students design a poster board to display Latin American dance styles such as mambo, the rumba, the cha-cha, or the conga. Choosing one dance independently, they would research the physical dance steps and the musical accompaniment, gathering primary sources, posters, boards, and they'll basically create a collage with album covers, movie posters, or still shots, or advertisements. And again, this is a kind of creative way for them to synthesize this knowledge of the dance and the music that came out of this migration to New York City. All right, so we're going to hop on along and we're going to talk about singer-songwriters and the environmental movement. So in this lesson, students will understand how singer-songwriters from the 1960s to today have addressed environmental concerns in their music by analyzing lyrics, newspaper articles, and photographs. So this lesson sort of builds on a lot of the ideas that are espoused in Rachel Carson's 1962 book. Rachel Carson was a marine biologist. She publishes this book in 1962 called Silent Spring, and it's a chilling account of the damage done to the environment by pollution, particularly in the form of chemicals and pesticides. In this book, Carson describes a fictional town in the heart of America with prosperous farms and abundance of wildlife, ferns, wildflowers, and more. Then a strange blight crept over the area, and maladies occurred among the chickens and other flocks and even humans, and unexplained deaths of adults and children happened, and vegetation withered, and farm animals were having difficulties reproducing. Now, the book states directly, this town does not actually exist, but it might easily have 1,000 counterparts in America or elsewhere in the world. I know of no community that has experienced all the misfortunes I described, yet every one of these disasters has actually happened somewhere, and many real communities have already suffered a substantial number of them. A grim specter has crept upon us almost unnoticed, and this imagined tragedy can easily become a stark reality we all shall know. So 8 years after she publishes Silent Spring, we have our first Earth Day. And this is a newspaper clipping from that. And Americans joined in protest over the degradation of the country's air and water, launching an environmental movement. Okay, I'm going to play you one song from this. I have 3, but I'm going to play you Big Yellow Taxi and just a little bit of it. So on her 1970 album, Ladies of the Canyon, Joni Mitchell released the single Big Yellow Taxi. According to Mitchell's website, she was looking out of her hotel window in Hawaii, and she was looking at the Pacific scenery and then shifted her gaze downward to find a parking lot. The natural beauty of Hawaii was rudely interrupted by a slab of pavement. The line, they paid paradise and put up a parking lot, comes directly from that experience. So we'll just play just a moment of that.
They took all the trees, put them in a tree museum, and they charged the people $1.50 just to see them. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Hey, farmer, put away the DDT now. Give me spots on my apples, Believe me, the birds and the bees. Please don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got to.
All right, perfect. And I'm just going to skip the other two songs, but just so you know, it's Mercy, Mercy Me, The Ecology by Marvin Gaye, and then Jackson Brown's Before the Deluge. But we're going to skip that so I can get this last lesson in for you. We can study the Great Migration through looking at this lesson and many lessons. We talked about muddy waters in the introduction. So we can look at this lesson, the blues and the sound of rural poverty. So I'm going to give you just a real quick speed background on what's happening just before the Great Migration. So in the beginning of the 1900s, 90% of Black people in the U.S. lived in the American South. By 1930s, that number is down to 79% of all Black folks in America residing in the South. So what that lets us know is that there's a significant out-migration within the first few decades of the 20th century. But actually, to understand the Great Migration, it even helps to back it up a little bit. And let's go to 1870 to 1900s. So Black people began migrating basically right after the Civil War, but they weren't migrating north. They were migrating within the South. So they were migrating from rural areas to more urban areas in the South. And then Black folks were migrating as innovations in cotton grew, they began to migrate to the Southwest. So the cotton states are South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama. And so folks from those areas and other parts of the South began to migrate to Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. Okay, but what happens? So number one, that migration, that late 19th century migration is happening because this is the first time in U.S. history that all Black people are free. So they're free to move around and they start migrating. But what just brings them to the northern cities and to the northern Midwestern cities is that World War I happens and leading up to World War I. So we really consider the Great Migration 1910 through 1970, and most of the time we break it up into two eras, the World War I era and the World War II era. Well, World War I is significant because when World War I is happening, then there are restrictions on European immigrants, which means non-agricultural jobs are now demanding labor, and they're willing to take Black labor at this time. And that is what is a pull factor for Black folks to leave the South and go to northern or Midwestern cities. Now, you just heard me say pull factors. Most of the time when we're talking about anybody's migration, we use the term push-pull factors. So what's pushing them out of their place of origin, what's pulling them to the new location. But I'm going to invite us, when we're thinking about the Great Migration, to use this framework of forces on top of those push-pull factors. So they're economic forces, precipitating causes, and social forces. And when we're looking at economic forces, when we're looking at precipitating causes, we're looking at the natural disasters. So we're looking at floods and boll weevils, especially within the South during this early 1900 period. So just really quickly to give you some background on the floods, what we're talking about, this in the 1870s, the Mississippi River Commission recommended the construction of levees as the best means of containing the river. But many engineers opposed this because they said that compressing a river between walls would actually increase volume and enhance its power. And that's exactly what happened in 1927. Great flood breaks out and it destroys 27,000 square miles from Cairo, Illinois to Mississippi. This is a picture of that flood in Mississippi. Many Black folks were adversely affected. We are so short on time, I'm not going to play this song, but Bessie Smith has this song, Homeless Blues. I'm not going to play it, but I'm just going to read you some lyrics while we're looking at this picture. So here are lyrics from Bessie's song, Ma and Pa got drowned. Mississippi, you the blame. My ma and pa got drowned. Mississippi, you the blame. Mississippi River, I can't stand to hear your name. Homeless, yes, I'm homeless. Might as well be dead. Oh, you know I'm homeless. Might as well be dead. Hungry and disgusted. No place to lay my head. All right, so primary source of using music to these lyrics to understand how that flood impacted people. and again, how that motivated migration. The other natural issue was the boll weevil outbreak. The boll weevil is a pest and that can destroy thousands of cotton crops. And the outbreak really started in Texas 1890, makes its way to Alabama in 1910, makes its way to South Carolina in 1918. We have this beautiful song by Charlie Patton called Boll Weevil. I'm not going to play this one either, but just want to show you this painting by Jacob Lawrence, who was born in 1917 in Atlantic City. This is from the Migration series. He was born in Atlantic City, moved to Harlem at age 13, so he would have been there by 1930. In 1941, he creates this series, and this is the boll weevil. And each painting in the 60-panel series has a line, "They left because the boll weevil had ravaged the cotton crops." So you can see his depiction of that. Okay, we're going to hop on over to economic forces. So again, there's a pull because there's more jobs, but the push is that the Southern economy is already not great after the Civil War. Then we have this artificial caste system where we have landowning rich white people, and then we have poor white people competing with black labor. But black labor has restrictions on alternative opportunities, so that really does push black people and limit them in terms of their economic opportunities. And then, of course, sharecropping is a terrible system where the sharecroppers have to pay the landowners 30 to 50% of their crop, but the landowners control production, weighing, marketing, record keeping, and it's really a system of indebted servitude. So I'm not going to play this one either because we're really short on time. I'm just going to run through some photo evidence of sharecropping so that we can see the impact of the poverty. This painting is from the Migration series also. This is panel number 70. Tenant farmers received harsh treatment at the hands of the planters. So you see this is leading to what we were talking about with sharecroppings, where there was this system was wrought with fraud because they controlled all the record keeping, so they could fudge the numbers in terms of how much the people who were actually working in the fields, the laborers, were bringing in terms of their production. Okay, so then there are social forces. And the biggest social force, which we do have to talk about, is racial violence. So there's racial violence, but there's also an unfair court system. There's discrimination in public conveyances, and then there's unequal education. And so Emmett Scott in 1919 in the Journal of Negro History, Volume 4, states, both whites and Negroes, in mentioning the reasons for the movement, generally give lynchings as one of the more important causes, and the state of fear of the mob has greatly accelerated the exodus. Okay, I may have time to play this last video. This is Alabama Blues, where we can get a glimpse of the impact of these social forces on motivating people to leave the South. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. And again, this is a powerful look and glimpse at the profound impact that the social forces had and the despair that it had on many people who were living under that artificial caste system. And so this whole lesson ends with an assessment where students basically do a tour of all of the areas that are mentioned in the photographic evidence and in the songs, and then they create a scrapbook to commemorate their journey. and to look at these different forces and these social, economic, and political conditions that are motivating migration. Okay, so I think I almost went over, so I'm just going to stop there and say, please reach out to me at Triza at teachrock.org for more questions, and I really have enjoyed sharing this all with you.
It is all good. Thank you so much. And I'm looking at the chat, and the thank yous and the expressions of gratitude are filling the chat right now. So thank you so very much for an incredibly rich and substantive and thoughtful presentation that hit on so many levels for everybody in the room. I was here just kind of enthralled in the chat, just watching all of the remarks from just personal experiences, how we engage with music, and also how the teachers, these educators, are already integrating music into their classrooms. So so very much appreciated. As I mentioned before, I've been looking forward to this, and so I will encourage everyone who's in the room to come back and check out the on-demand video, because I know there were questions about some of the song titles, and so you'll be able to come back, pause, and listen and write them down. And again, Triza's information is on the screen right now. And so she welcomes you all to reach out to her if you have any questions. Yes, and Tatiana, yes, please explore TeachRock more, so much more to come, particularly with the release of the next the People's Playlist. So very good. Everyone, continue to follow all the work that the whole TeachRock and Rock and Soul Forever organization, all that they're doing. Equally so, please continue to follow us at nationalhumanitycenter.org and all of our various social media channels for the latest updates, particularly with the remaining webinars in the series, as well as the institutes that we will be running this summer. To support the humanities education programs, NHC education programs provide a bridge between the academic world and the working classroom. Your gift, no matter how modest, can open up a world of ideas for teachers and rekindle their enthusiasm for the subjects they teach by providing the knowledge and tools they and their students need to make a difference. Your gift matters no matter how small or how large. So, all right, we will be back on January 27, challenging the collective memory approach using Arab American labor history to expand U.S. history curricula with former NHC fellow Akram Khater, who will be here with us. And we've worked with Akram. We also worked with him on developing an online course some time ago, and he's stopped by and supported us. He's over at NC State. So he'll be here on the 27th. But for now, everyone, take care and be well. For those of us who are, facing these, winter events that are coming up, take care of yourself, be well, and stay warm. And I look forward to seeing you all here on the other side when we get together. And again, Triza, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and play that Mercy, Mercy Me.
Thank you for playing that. Yes, I'm sorry I didn't play that during the session, but thank you for taking us out with that.
Yeah, it's all good. That's hands down. That's one of my favorites. This just means we have to bring you back, and we have to do a part 2.
You guys were so great. Thanks for everything.
All right, you're welcome. I'll chat with you soon.
All right. Good night, everybody.